everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reluctant Hero podcast. This podcast has been created to inspire others through creative stories, through the stories of achievement, and overcoming the reluctance because we all have the hero inside of ourselves, and sometimes we are reluctant to let it out and fully express ourselves based on whatever we perceive the life or ourselves to be. So it has been my mission to kind of showcase these stories and share it with you so that you can hear them, get inspired, and overcome your own reluctance through these stories. And today I have Anthony as a guest. Anthony, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your special way of creativity?
Okay, yes. Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Anthony Jones. So I am a designer. I primarily specialize in custom fonts, logos, as well as any kind of apparel design. So for me, it's been a long journey. It started back out in my youth at age 13. I created my own font coming from Northern California, got inspired through graffiti culture and whatnot. And I always really just seen, names and just different sayings on trains. And so I got inspired at a young age. So I wanted to have my own kind of unique look. And also had a lot of trauma in my childhood. So that's what kind of allowed me to find my own creative path. And ideally, my whole objective is just to allow others that don't necessarily know if they have any creativity within inside themselves to really be able to hone in and really can know that they do have creativity. I want to be able to allow them to have that inspiration through my creative works. So anytime, we see things on TV or we go in malls, AI is taking over everything, how people say. But, everybody can be their own creative and everybody can design their own future. But however, it is up to us in all reality. So that's that's my whole spiel. So
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure like a lot of people will relate to the fact that we all have childhood traumas. Nobody has gone through that unscathed. There's always something in the past that we can call traumas. And I find it fascinating how you found creativity to overcome that. And how has it helped you to become a better person doing the fonts, designing, and having that creativity?
well, for me, it's allowed me to really expand and really grow more and learn more about myself and things that I didn't know that I was good at. And really just I didn't know that I was just so inspiring to others just from when they hear my story, see some of my unique work. I'll do sometimes custom things for myself that I want to wear. And I'll notice I go out in public and people are just like, oh man, that's unique. And I'm like, bro, it'll look like, just I don't want to say trash, but it'll just be like doodling, like on like a sweatsuit or a t-shirt, and like people are like, "Oh, this is just so unique." So that right there, allowed me to look at my work as raw talent and something to not just take for granted. I guess I should say. So that's kind of been as for me. It started out in high school. I remember I took an entrepreneurship class my senior year of high school, and I remember the teacher, she was telling all of us, I want y'all to come up with a product that y'all want to sell on Shark Tank, right? So I couldn't think of anything. I'm like, what about a t-shirt? And so I just, went on the site and started, designing a t-shirt. And later on, a couple months later, she had knew a lady in the neighborhood that actually has a business at her home. And she literally does t-shirts for a living. And so she helped me with my first two designs. I went on to my university, took those two t-shirts. Everybody on the campus loved them. But of course, at 19, fresh out of high school, I'm like, where am I going to get all these t-shirts? I didn't have any money. I was, having little school money that I had. So I thought it was just an idea. But years later, it came back to me. And I just since then been creating and creating, so just developing more. So
Yeah, it is such a unique thing because we all love t-shirts. Like everybody wears t-shirt. It's such a common item. And we also love to self-express. Like we wear logos or we wear special sayings that we like on t-shirts because it actually unites us with each other. Like if one person is wearing a one kind of logo and another person sees another person with the same logo, it's automatically kind of unites them. So the way that is related to self-expression, I find it's incredibly relevant because as you walk through life the way that I kind of perceive it, you project into the world who you are, and sometimes it's easier to say it on a t-shirt and have positive things. So have you found the way to kind of project your own positivity into the world by wearing your own designs?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I remember in the library a couple months ago, I was working on an alphabet. I sometimes like go to the library and just have my own time to work there. And so I remember one of the workers there actually recommended, hey, how would you feel about, being like maybe a teacher to some of the younger kids that are maybe like elementary, middle school to teach them their own penmanship and things like that. And I'm like, oh wow, okay. I wasn't thinking, that broad, but something like that, I honestly wouldn't because the head director asked, what would I charge? And again, I wouldn't even charge a fee or something like that because again, even for me, I feel like definitely from the ages, I say 12 to like 15 is definitely where kids, find their niche, I guess I should say. So I feel like that's a good age, but I was definitely honored to even just be presented with something like that. But to answer your question, yes, because every time I wear certain things, I get different feedback from different people. I notice certain people's body language is different, so I'm like, okay, maybe this is going to be something bigger than what I'm thinking. So because eventually my ultimate goal is to eventually have my own textile mill overseas to where I can have t-shirts all over around the world in bulk amounts of blanks to where I can sell to companies for $2 to $5 a piece and they can use for printing uses and things like that. And also, I will say my personal favorite is organic cotton t-shirts because there's no heavy metals, no chemicals, skin allergens, things like that. So
Yeah, that's amazing. And who knows, maybe there will be new materials being made as the technology evolves because there's new fabrics that are constantly being created. And this
mm.
actually, when you're talking about something in the previous minute, it reminded me of how Steve Jobs actually took a calligraphy class. It was
Yeah.
totally random. He had no idea why, but it all led to current Apple products using the specific fonts to present a certain feeling. So,
Mm.
calligraphy and writing and words, they have meaning. Not only the words, they have meaning in themselves, but when we see them, we associate certain things with them. So it is a very powerful vehicle for improving perception, improving connection, and creativity is part of it. And how do you perceive that meaning within the words that you translate?
Well, so for me, I know typically just being an artist, I always have different emotions at times. So a lot of times when I create, it could be from, a sense of excitement. Sometimes it could be from intensity. So for me, it really just kind of depends. But I will say a lot of times, the saying how people refer to actions are always, powerful. However, I don't always agree because I feel like sometimes words can be just as powerful because, typically the way it works is through communication, right? Which consists of words, right? So, and a lot of times, when developing relationships or, even getting different, job opportunities, literally saying the wrong thing sometimes can, make or break a relationship. So that's always something I try to, be mindful on. So that's why I guess I'm so big on creating logos with primarily words is because when you look at, big brands like Walmart, Amazon, they're consist of words, right? Because you see, graphics and things like that, murals with people, those are nice too. However, I just feel like even like poetry, right? It's very like people like to sit down and see that stuff. So I guess just to answer that, as I've gotten older, I've really gotten better with just how I use words, how I perceive them, process them. So
That is such a good point, that about the communication and how things can be, there could be a whole bunch of meanings that could be packed in the few words, the phrase, and it can get stuck with people in their minds. The biggest sayings have the fewest words in them, and the biggest brands know that. That's how they really utilize the words. By putting less out there, it creates more effect. So it's really interesting how it could be a vehicle for so much.
one big thing though that is really kind of, I don't want to say necessarily a downfall, but it makes it difficult with the AI that's, kind of taking over how people say, for artists like me that are really authentic and have done something, really from scratch and practice it for a long time. Because it makes it hard to just really see authenticity when you see so much artificial intelligence where people can just go and create something that's not really real. And then it takes away from other artists that have, worked hard. So I can definitely feel for any other artists that, you know, have been grinding for years and still haven't got a breakthrough. So I definitely, can feel for them. So it is a challenge, I'll say. But me personally, I don't really use AI too much at all. But I'm not against AI either. So it's 50-50 the way I view
Yeah,
it.
well, it's a huge topic of conversation, AI, and
Definitely.
everybody's talking about it right now because it is the hottest topic on the market. It is affecting everybody. It is affecting artists. It is affecting the white collar jobs like lawyers and accountants. It is affecting even potentially truck drivers. Every single person on the planet is going to be affected by that. So either we're going to find creative ways to deal with that, or we're just gonna succumb. So I think that is the number one reason why artists should be stepping into their own potential, stepping into their skills and talents, because the creativity that comes with human potential can never be matched with artificial intelligence.
Mhm. For sure. I agree. Because I mean, it's just, and it's funny. Do you remember the movie I Robot with Will Smith?
Yeah.
I didn't know that that was really pertaining around AI. So it was what they were predicting in like 2035. But I was having a conversation with someone a couple months back, and they're like, "You remember the movie I Robot? That was centered around AI." I'm like, "Oh, well, I just thought it was a movie with robots." So, but again, I'm definitely curious to see because I know for like new generations coming in, it's definitely going to be more opportunity for them. But I think it's always good to know authenticity and creativity and to always create something yourself because then you could know if you're creative or what you're good at, what you can learn more of. So
Well,
that's
it
definitely.
definitely is. And one thing that I think about is AI specializes in information. It is based on information, and we can never match it by thinking. Like, we only have so much capacity in intellectual thinking and processing. We can probably never match that level of capacity of accumulating knowledge and processing the speed of it with AI. So the
Mhm.
only thing will be left would be authenticity, would be that authentic personal expression, the creativity and artistic talent. No matter how small or big a person thinks their artistic talent is, there's still something. And this is the
Always.
biggest message I'm trying to make and send out into the world, that everybody has creativity within them, and that is the number one priority for people to connect with that so that they can be fully themselves, and they won't have to compete with computers based on informational processing, because we as humans can never match that. So the only
I
thing we
agree.
can do is create.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. I mean, because it's it's getting very, very like more complex than just things are on digital currency and so many different, and you're right with the, different fabrics and things like that. So that's why I always like to look at, because me personally, when I look at a lot of different, even if you look at certain products that are like in Walmarts or, bigger corporations, I noticed that a lot of the products don't necessarily pertain to things that are necessarily centered around like health. It's just more kind of in my way I look at it, more so just like longevity and finances, right? So I don't know. It's really just I'm curious to see how within the next decade how things are gonna turn out. So with AI and even just with a lot of vehicles, you got the Teslas, Lucid. It's a couple different ones. So
Yeah, to funny thing to mention about Teslas, I've heard from a number of people that
oh yeah,
they actually having trouble charging those things. So I'm like, I don't know. Well, it was a great idea, but now we're running into issues.
yeah.
So, so,
So,
and I'm curious, what do you, how are you dealing with the aspect you actually mentioned it a moment ago before we started the podcast of monetization, something that is authentically your own creativity? Where is the balance, or how did you find to balance that needing to make money from it but also wanting to do it for other reasons other than money?
well, so for me, and I'm glad you brought that up because for me, I know my ultimate goal is to be a global philanthropist. And reason being is just because once I do hit, the capital of what I see, I'm stable enough to go and venture off into other things. I want to look at things from an aspect of, okay, where is an issue and where can I add value to the issue, right? So that's been my biggest thing of not just looking at it because a lot of times with brands, with millennials and things like that, it's one thing to look at it, especially even with social media. It's more so people look at it, oh, well, if it's not a celebrity or a ball player, they don't really take it serious, right? But for me, I always like doing things directly or even being at events or virtual things because then you can really get a honest feel for how someone operates, the personality. Um, but yeah, that's my ultimate, the philanthropy thing is just because always adding value is always going to be powerful in anything that we do. So
That is a great point because aiming at something bigger and higher is always beneficial for, and I've talked to many people and it always comes up this internal conflict between wanting to provide your value and continue contributing to the world as an artist, as a creative, and then having difficult charging for that because things should be free or they should be available, or there's always internal conflict for artists, I think, present, and somehow it needs to be overcome. And maybe that is the idea of looking at something so much bigger, like a philanthropy. You have to make a lot of money in order to become a philanthropist.
for
But
sure,
what's the result? The result is that you can help a lot of people transcend whatever difficulties that they're doing. Philanthropists are building schools, they're setting up museums. I was just at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and that was essentially a philanthropist project where Paul Getty donated his entire art collection to the city. That is an amazing achievement. And wouldn't every person want to strive towards that? That is such a high goal. So if every artist was to start thinking bigger, start thinking how they could provide value for massive amount of people, then maybe it could shift the conversation from being the struggling artist to being the philanthropist artist. What
I
kind of
agree.
world would that be then? You
I
know?
honestly agree. I honestly agree with that because again, it's very just I don't know. Like a lot of times for me, I don't like to pressure anybody into buying one of my products or a t-shirt or anything like that. So for example, like if I know that there's other methods out there that are cheaper than what I charge, I'll always recommend somebody in a different direction. not to just push them away, but again, you always got to know your value and, your pricing is your pricing for a reason. But a lot of times I know certain people, they're, really try to get people in and pitch things to them. But me, I've never been like that because again, even just for my t-shirts alone, they range anywhere from as low as $30 up to $100, right? But at the same time, there's lots of times where I do giveaways for different things. So I had donated actually one t-shirt to a hospital back in May of 2023 for Mental Health Awareness Month. So yeah, I'm always looking for different ways to, and I don't even just look for ways to just get like noticed. So, but more so just to, give and, look into ways to serve others. So,
Yeah, and that's a very, very good point because as we all have to deal with sales, there's different approach to selling and coming out of the previous versions of selling and now moving to this new world of more kind of aligned selling, or it changes the way we perceive it and the way we deal with it. But I'm wondering if you have noticed the difference between your virtual events and your kind of presence online and you being present in person at the events where you are the artist selling your own artwork somewhere and people are interacting with you. Have you noticed an effect on those people when they buy something from the person who's standing right there who created that?
well, and so the fact that you brought that up, right? So last March, actually, right, in my complex, actually where I stayed, I remember I was like, and this was actually a T-shirt that I ended up donating to the hospital. And so I wasn't even expecting this, but it was around like St. Patrick's Day weekend, I believe. And so I was actually doing some spray paint at the bottom of the T-shirt. So I was, like really like being hands on with it. And I noticed like literally when I was doing that, maybe within like 20 minutes into me doing it, there was like a crowd that's just surrounding me. And I'm like, I wasn't expecting that. So I was kind of put on the spotlight. So, but I definitely like that kind of energy because I feel like that's where you can really have an opportunity to grow. And two, also, it's just when people enjoy seeing, individuals do things, that can be a way of serving others. Because it's not always just like a, hey, I'm going to donate money, but it's kind of like if you look at athletes, right? How many people enjoy seeing that, or actors on TV, right? So it's kind of the same concept. So, but that was something that really stood out to me. So the in person thing is definitely very, very powerful because then people are like, wow, they're getting a different kind of, view and emotions. So that's definitely more powerful than just the online presence because I feel like social media, people don't get as aroused, as they do when they see things, in person. I mean, me personally, I don't, because I browse through social media all the time. But if I go to an art show or even just like fashion shows, for example, I went to a couple of those and I've gotten, put on the spotlight even at those. And I'm like, well, I'm not even in a fashion show, but just because of the outfit I had on, they wanted to put me on the spotlight. So,
Yeah, there is an element of personability that is present when we are there with people in the same space and
mhm.
interacting in close proximity. There is a certain element of connectedness that happens that just can't happen online. And the more we get separated through in our global economies and everybody is online, the more it becomes difficult to have this connectivity, this unique approach. And maybe that is the way for the future, where we need to be back into smaller communities where we're interacting with people one on one again. When we create smaller circles so that we can have attention diverted to smaller amount of people but bigger value through our presence. I don't know, maybe it is the way for the future to overcome this increased technological advancement that we're dealing with.
I agree. Because again, it's always communities, environments, but when everything can just come together, I feel as though it's always something good. Even just like a whole state, coming together, it's always that's why I always like to travel and go different places so I can get a different feel for things, how things operate. Because I know my big goal is to somehow do business eventually in like Italy. because I always Italy has lots of different fashion and art is big out there, you know. So I've always been some of the biggest, you know, fashion brands are out there too. So you know, I just want to have a different mindset and just be able to expand my creativity and see it from a different, you know, angle. I guess I should say.
Absolutely. And not only that, but think about Italy as the birthplace of Renaissance.
Oh yeah.
That's where it all began. And it was because of travel. I was talking to somebody recently, and that was brought up because of the travel, which resulted in expanded commerce,
Hmm.
and people started having more money. They started being able to invest more into art, and art just flourished at that time. How interesting was that? And it remains within that. The Italy and that whole area is still full of this creative approach, and the architecture is obviously stunning there. So it still seems to be like a place to be creative in many ways. So it's no wonder that you want to end up there with all of things that you're creating. And I was going to mention also something that you touched upon earlier. When we go see athletes in action playing a game, we all of a sudden kind of become part of that game. We are vicariously experiencing their mastery just by watching them. And the same thing happens with artists. We also vicariously expressing and experiencing their mastery of their craft. So that connects me to my point that I was saying, how it is important to be in person there because people can connect and get that feeling of creativity, that self expression, and that inspiration that artists can translate for people.
Absolutely, because again, it's always networking and just building, you know, genuine relationships is always very. And I'm noticing as I'm getting older that it's more important, especially now that I'm like out of college, out of high school, in the real world. So it's definitely more. I just see it always as just more powerful. Just big events always because again, you never know who you may cross paths with, and just who may be inspired or just storytelling is major too. So that's another big thing. But yeah, it's all, I mean, from art to, you know, entertainment, I think it all kind of ties in for sure. So, I mean, I know even for me, even sometimes food, you know, even food gets me excited. So, because I love to, you know, eat a lot. So, try different restaurants, you know, experience different foods. So,
Totally. And that actually
mhm.
brings the novelty factor, which enhances the creativity. But I want to actually go back to the premise of this podcast, Reluctant Hero. And I want to ask you if you ever felt reluctance going public with your brand, going public with your creation and your art.
I know I would always want to eventually get to that because I know my main thing was never to ever be like a getting to a point of being like a celebrity or on TV or anything. I mean, if that's what comes with it, I mean, that's just what come with it. But ultimately, leadership is never. I took a course actually in college, and I remember the professor was telling me that leadership is always about others speaking on you, not necessarily going around like, oh, I'm this, you know, big time this, but more so when other people can say, oh, because of Anthony or because of so and so, you know, I felt, you know, the courage to be able to go and pursue something, you know, bigger than what I thought I could, or I didn't have the, you know, the discipline or I didn't have the motivation before. So for me, I definitely always wanted to, you know, eventually get that exposure because actually someone I really look up to is the founder of Shark Tank, Damon John. So yeah, I definitely look up to because his story kind of, you know, resonates with my story a little bit. So yeah, eventually I definitely want to get to that point. So and not just more so like to earn sales or net worth, but more so then it can touch different people, meaning like they have the knowledge of it. And now it's just noticed on a bigger level to where it can have a more of an influence in a positive way, basically. So
I really like that approach about leadership, how it
yeah.
is being reflected through other people. It's not about when you're a leader, it's not about you, it's about what kind of value you bring into the community. So it totally makes sense. And for anybody listening, well, just focus on your creativity and forget about your reluctance, because there's bigger things out there that require your art. There's just always more to impact, more to create, and more to affect by being fully expressive. So that's kind of, everybody should be striving towards that level of leadership at some point in their life and work towards that.
Definitely, because for me, I know my main thing has always been throughout middle school and just my younger ages, I never really showed a lot of emotion. And I always used to feel like it was just a need for me to have to prove something. So, but now I feel like, sometimes when that does happen, it's because it's a certain way that you're going to get used, right? So, and that's what I'm starting to come with realization on, because my grandma, for example, right, she passed away a couple of years ago, but she was always like my number one supporter, and she always would see me like, because I would mimic, different actors when I was young, and she was always like, "Oh, you need to go to Hollywood and act and this and that." So she always saw that light and value in me like way more than I would. And I'm like, Hollywood, I'm like, nah, that ain't gonna be the case. But that was always, big for me. So I'm just grateful for that. And yeah, I definitely just, that's why I always like to support, regardless of it's something up and coming. Because a lot of times I feel like people, they look at things, how long have you been in business, or why are you charging this or that? Me personally, I don't care what the price is. If I know if it's something I like, it's gonna add value to me and it stands out and I can afford it, I'm gonna buy it. I'm not gonna ask a question as to why is it $10,000? Why is it, $5? So I just don't never like that, when people kind of put those labels on things, because there's meaning behind it, there's value behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to art, there's also an interesting thing that happens with art, is that
Mhm.
there's an art market for it. And the art
Mhm.
market actually determines the price, which is, I'm not sure if I agree or not, but that's how things have been. So,
Mhm.
and that's a much deeper conversation than that. But just in terms of creative art pursuits, the value often doesn't match the price. So that's something to consider when trying to create something. And it's been very difficult for me personally to put a price on my art, on whatever it is that to create, especially if it's not something standardized already. And I think a lot of artists out there might agree that it sometimes can be really tricky putting a price on your work, because it
That's
comes from your soul, it comes from your own being. So how can you
mhm.
really price it? It's almost easier to make it free and just give it into the world than trying to figure out, well, how much is it going to cost. But that's the game here. If we are to use art as a vehicle for our self-expression and lead us into the growth and possibility, then somehow monetization has to happen. And that is that is the big topic of conversation that could go on for hours.
Oh yeah, I agree. Because again, it's all, and that's why a lot of times, I don't mind doing giveaways or giving some things to family. But then again, sometimes I always come across people that are like, "Oh, you should be charging these high amounts or this and that." But again, it's never, for me. It's always been a passion thing as opposed to just an earning thing. And that's why I always try to get it in like friends' heads to where it's like, it's one thing to go be passionate about something, but I'm not gonna go try to start five different businesses if I haven't even made a million or a couple quarter millions or something off of one, right? So that's why I feel like tunnel vision is important too. Just really focusing on one thing. Once that one thing gets big, now I can go venture off into A, B, and C, right? Because a lot of times when I've noticed when I try to focus on creating too many things, I end up not you know, mastering any of them because I have too many different things I'm trying to do at once, as opposed to just focusing on that one thing. So,
Yeah, focus is absolute necessity for artists or anybody else. And
mm,
I like to think about the quote that business is supposed to make money. not only is the business supposed to make money for yourself, but it also supposed to make some kind of revenue or some kind of a productivity or enhancement for the clients as well. That is the whole purpose. Otherwise, they say it's an expensive hobby. And that is the distinction between the passion and something that is real and is out there. And sometimes it takes a very long time to change that passion into something that produces tangible value out into the world, in the world for people. So for anybody who is a creative and they start with passion, my message would be to continue focusing on that, laser focusing. And I don't know if you agree or not with it, but something that you persist on eventually is deemed to work.
I agree. I highly agree for sure. So, because it's always, I mean, because if you look at a lot of the, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, they've consistently, put in effort and just really focused, and now, they're masters at what they do. So, but again, trying to do, I understand, people want to have different currencies flowing. I get it, but again, what if you can just make that first million off that one thing? So that's always the way and because just from hearing different watching other podcasts and seeing other figures that they made nine figures, eight figures and what they do, that's always inspiration to me to where, okay, if I just focus on this one thing, maybe it could be that one t-shirt that I can really just blast off with, and now I can venture off into different things and you know explore and expand, grow more. So
Yeah, and I always think about the quote from Bruce Lee, who said that I'm not afraid of the person who knows a thousand of kicks. I'm afraid of the person who trained himself one kick a thousand times.
yeah, see that it's major because again, it's one thing that yeah, I mean, just like with the fonts, for example, I mean, I've mastered those style over a course of 15 years, right? So of course for me it's nothing just to be in front of someone and do their name within like 5 minutes. So
Yeah. And so this was such a powerful conversation and packed with value. What would be in closing, what would be your final message to somebody who might be they just had a creative idea, they may be younger and they're not sure what to do about it, or they're not sure of the validity of that, and especially in light of all AI technology. What would you say to a person who has a similar kind of creative idea and they're just starting out?
I would definitely recommend if they don't have a community already to either form one, or if not, try to get around someone that either they look up to in a way and really just learn from that person. And again, just to consistently stay focused and keep creating, and really just knowing that to trust in yourself and have faith, that you can, anything you imagine can become reality in due time. So that's my
Yeah.
feedback in closing. So
That is amazing. I think your tagline is create your future or design your future.
design the future you desire, because again, that's ultimately up to us as individuals, right? From the time where we really get 18 out of high school, it's up to us. It's not up to our parents. It's not up to anybody else. So, because again, everybody has dreams and goals, but again, it's always in your mind, a blueprint on paper. You're trying to design it to be that case in 10, 20 plus years or a year later. So,
Yeah, I love that. And focus, don't try to do everything alone. Have a community, have a support system, have people you can rely on, and keep focusing on one thing that ignites you the most. That's kind of the biggest message. And have you ever considered, or maybe you already do, personalized names for people, like a signature type of thing in your font?
no, absolutely. And so, also, what I do is now, I normally offer to people. I mean, I don't, of course, never pitch anything, but what I'll do is I always offer people's first names to them for free. And then, of course, if they want the last name, I'll have a fee on that one. But I always, just because I've been doing that for so long. And so yeah, I always that's just something I enjoy doing. To where like, hey, let me sketch your name out. What's your color? And I'll do it, sketch it out, color, pencil, marker, whatever the case. So yeah, that's definitely and ultimately for the fonts, the whole goal is just to for the people that aren't creative, they can use my creativity to their advantage to go and put together a brand name or a special saying on a coffee mug, t-shirt, and now they have that. And I'm not getting any credit for it, right? They just download the file for 10 to 20 bucks.
Amazing.
Some are even going to be free. I mean, but those will be up sometime around summer. But yeah, that's ultimately
Mm.
my goal. So
That is really awesome. So for listeners, if anybody wants their personalized name to be done in the brand, Anthony is your guy. And where can people find more about you and get those names done?
so I know right now I am not my site is down because it's being expanded. So that they can offer the fonts and my own t-shirts and the branding package that I offer. However, I can be reached email at designtone95 at gmail, or my Instagram is underscore designtone, where that has some of my work on there. So that is two places I can be reached. So yeah, I'm always just excited by seeing art and just even when I go shopping, I can just be shopping for myself and I get excited always. So you know,
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, I'll put those links in the description. So if anybody wants to reach to you, then they can do that. And if you want to put them on the waiting list until your merchandise line is fully functional, then you can do that. But I think there's a lot of relevance in connecting with artists individually and
absolutely.
supporting them even in small ways and connecting and maintaining those kind of relationships with artists in the community because the artists currently lead the way. I believe that's my personal opinion. Creatives and artists of all kinds are leading in the way of improvements, and it's going to continue that way. Otherwise we just don't have a chance of making it through this technological revolution. So
Oh yeah, agree. Definitely agree. So it's definitely
yeah.
gonna be. I just can't wait to see how. Because we're in 2024, so by 2044, there's no telling where these are
Oof.
gonna be. I mean, so
Yeah,
but it's definitely
things are moving fast.
oh yeah, very fast. So I mean, because even my youngest brother, I mean, he graduates in May, so I'm like, oh wow, this my youngest brother, so he's already grown now. He just turned 18 yesterday. So
All right. Well, this was amazing episode. I hope everybody got a lot of value. Thank you, Anthony, so much for
absolutely,
being a guest on this podcast episode. And I wish you all the best. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll see you next time.